Good morning. I'm Bob Navarro. Welcome to the Journal. Thanks for tuning in. The elections are not until June of next year, but already it's the hot-button issue. I'm talking, of course, about bilingual education, specifically the ballot initiative called English for the Children, also known as the Unz Initiative. Ron Unz is the author and co-sponsor of English for the Children, and he's here with us to make his case. Also with us at our CBS 2 newsroom is Kelly Hayes-Raitt, who is with a group calling itself Citizens for an Educated America, No on Unz. We'll hear from both of them as we go along. Thank you to both of you for being here. As I understand your initiative, it would put an end to bilingual education in California unless a parent requests it.
Exactly. In other words, bilingual
and then only for a year.
Not really. In other words, if the parents seek a waiver to have their children placed or kept in a bilingual program, that could continue as long as they want it.
And if the waiver is denied, of course...
Right, then their child would be in an English language program, but there wouldn't be any reason...
Now, your reason for getting behind and sponsoring an initiative like this, spending your own money and recruiting other people's money as well, I understand you spent at least $200,000, possibly more. Why this issue of all the issues that confront California?
Well, I think it's a very important issue. It's also an issue I've been interested in and involved in for many years, at least 10 or 15 years that I've been following bilingual education, very skeptical of the facts behind it. Then last year, I read a series of articles in the Los Angeles Times describing a group of immigrant Latino parents who actually had to begin a public boycott of their local elementary school because the school was refusing to teach their children English. That seemed shocking to me. I ended up meeting with some of the parents, getting more of the details of the current state of bilingual education in California, and finding out how bad it was. The law governing bilingual education here expired 10 years ago, and the state legislature has been deadlocked for 10 straight years on doing anything about it. So the only chance of changing the system seemed through the initiative process.
Kelly Hayes, why do you think the Unz Initiative is not what California needs?
Well, Bob, I think we need to be very clear. The Unz Initiative is not about bilingual education. It's a very specific proposal that will cause more problems than it attempts to solve. What it will do is take the limited English-speaking children and put them in a classroom together for 1 year with a teacher who is forbidden by law and under the threat of a lawsuit from speaking any language to them other than English. And after that 1 year, only 180 days, those children will be put into regular classrooms even if they haven't mastered enough academic English to succeed. Now, logistically, the way this will work is if the Ron Unz Initiative passes, the state has 60 days to implement this new scheme for 1.38 million children. In the second year, only incoming kindergartners and new immigrants will be placed into this special program. What that means is that we can end up with a scenario with a 13-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl together in the same classroom. A 13-year-old immigrant boy trying to learn algebra and a bunch of 6-year-old kindergartners learning how to count. I think that's mean.
Well, aside from the mean part, is that accurate?
Oh, it's completely inaccurate. First of all, the initiative does not prohibit teachers from speaking the child's native language. It doesn't prohibit that at all. It simply says that the majority, the bulk of the language instruction given in a regular English class be in the English language. Right now, in many cases, children are only given 30 minutes of English a day, and that's unreasonable. Also, the initiative in no way forces the schools to combine children of different grade levels together. That only probably would occur in very rural areas. Excuse me. If you really read the initiative, it says it can be done under extreme circumstances. It certainly doesn't require it.
It does not say under extreme circumstances. Article 2, Section 305, which is the very first provision of this initiative, says local schools shall be permitted to place in the same classroom English learners of different ages, but whose degree of English proficiency is similar.
Permitted is not required.
Local schools should be encouraged to mix together in the same classroom English learners from different native language groups. What this says is that if a school doesn't have 20 13-year-old new immigrants, then they're going to have to find a place to put those 13-year-olds. So it's possible for a new immigrant to be the only new 13-year-old in that school district, to be put into a classroom with 6-year-olds. That's one of the unintended consequences of a poorly written initiative, and that's what the Ron Unz Initiative is. And Bob, let me point out one thing. If this initiative passes, we're stuck with it. It can't be fixed except by another initiative or a 2/3 vote of the legislature and a signature from the governor.
No,
but I'd like to point out, two other problems.
It's very interesting that after 10 straight years of the state legislature doing nothing about the failed system of bilingual education, the opponents of our initiative, which is the only chance of changing the system, are refusing to defend the current system whatsoever. They, in effect, have conceded that bilingual education doesn't work.
This is not a referendum on bilingual education.
Excuse me. Bilingual education has been present in California for 20 years. Right now, only 5 or 6% of the children who don't know English learn English each year.
Isn't it possible that we should mend it instead of ending it?
They've been trying to mend it for 10 years.
This would seem to end it.
It doesn't work. That's the problem with it.
Kelly?
We've tried it for 20 years. It doesn't work.
I'd like to ask Mr. Unz a question. He cites the statistic that only 5% of the students learn English every year.
5 or 6.
What that statistic means is that 5 or 6% of the students are reclassified as being fluent in English. That doesn't mean that 95% of the children have failed. What that means is that they haven't learned enough English yet to be called fluent, which just proves that children can't learn enough fluent English in just a year. I would like to ask Mr. Unz, what percentage success rate does your system have, your untested system?
Now, to give you one example,
I'd like you to answer the question, please.
I will give you an answer to the question. My co-proponent on the initiative, Gloria Mata-Tuckman, who's a first-grade teacher in Santa Ana, has a class of incoming limited English children. At the beginning of that year in first grade, none of them know English. At the end of that year, all of them have learned to read and write English properly. Around the world, in every country except the United States, it is generally recognized that immigrant children who don't speak the language can learn it within 1 year.
Now,
bilingual education claims that it takes 7 years for a child to learn English, which is nonsense.
Let me stop you both there. When we come back in our next section, we will talk indeed about the record of bilingual education and indeed how your initiative will address that in the criticism of it. We'll be back in a minute.